He wanted to scream, but he didn't. Moses just stood there, hands locked around his staff, listening to thirst turn into anger. The camp groaned under a hard sun. Dust clung to faces. Children cried with dry mouths. And the people didn't blame the heat. They blamed him. "Why did you bring us here?" someone shouted. Another voice cut in, sharp like flint. "We were better off before." Moses felt every word land on him, not because he feared them, because he knew what thirst can do to faith. He looked at Aaron. Aaron's eyes were tired too. Leaders were supposed to be strong, but today, strength felt like a thin rope. They stepped away from the crowd, toward the place of meeting, away from noise, away from accusations. Moses dropped to his knees like his bones finally admitted the truth. He couldn't carry this alone. Silence. Then, presence. Heavy. Clean. Like air after a storm. Moses didn't lift his head. He waited for a command, and when it came, it wasn't what he expected. Because the next time he faced the people, one wrong move would cost more than water. Moses rose before the sun, not because he had hope, because he had a job. The sand was cool for a moment, and the sky was still dark enough to hide the camp's faces, but he could already hear it, the slow build, the murmurs turning into a wave. By mid-morning, the crowd had found him again. They didn't come like neighbors. They came like judges. A man pushed forward, eyes red with anger. "There's no water, no wells, no streams, just stones and dust. Is this your plan?" Another voice, a woman's, tighter, quieter, worse. "Our children are thirsty." That hit Moses harder than the shouting. He scanned the line of people, dry lips, cracked jars, hands shaking as if holding air could turn into a drink. He wanted to say, "I didn't choose this desert." He wanted to say, "I'm tired too." Instead, he lifted his staff a little as if that old piece of wood could keep order. "Away!" someone yelled. "Let us go back." Back. To slavery, dressed up as certainty. Moses felt his patience pull thin, not snapping, yet. But he could feel the strain in his chest, like a cord stretched too long. Aaron stepped close, speaking low. "We should go." Moses didn't argue. Arguing with thirst was like arguing with fire. They turned and walked, fast, toward the place where God's presence met them. The noise followed like flies. Moses could feel eyes on his back, waiting for him to fail, waiting for him to prove he was just a man. Inside, the air felt different, still, heavy. Moses and Aaron dropped to the ground, faces down, not as a show, as surrender. Then the silence changed, not empty now, full. Moses heard the instruction clear as a blade. "Take the staff, gather the people, speak to the rock, and it will give its water. Speak, not strike, not force, not prove, just speak." Moses gripped the staff anyway. Habit, memory, old victories. He stood, and for a second he felt something dangerous rise in him. Relief mixed with anger. Water was coming, but so was a test, and the crowd outside didn't know they were standing on the edge of it. The rock was already there, waiting like it had been waiting for years. A hard slab near the edge of the camp, no shade, no mercy, just stone that didn't care how many people stared at it. Moses walked toward it with Aaron beside him. The staff in Moses' hand felt heavier than it should. He told himself it was only wood, only a tool. But the crowd followed like a storm with feet. They gathered in a wide circle, men, women, kids, elders, everyone close enough to see if God would show up, or if Moses would finally fail. A boy coughed, dry and rough. A mother pressed her hand to the child's mouth as if she could hold the thirst inside. Moses swallowed. His own mouth was dry too. He could taste dust on his tongue. He remembered the words. "Take the staff. Gather the people. Speak to the rock. Speak." He climbed onto a low rise beside the stone so they could all hear him. For a moment, he wanted to do it right. Simple, clean, obedient. He wanted to be the leader who didn't break. Then the shouting started again, right in his face. "You dragged us out here. We're dying. Where's your God now?" Moses' chest tightened. He felt the years of complaints stacking up like stones inside him. Every rebel meeting, every whispered insult, every time he begged for them and they turned and bit him anyway. Aaron leaned in, quiet. "Moses, just do it." Moses lifted his staff. The crowd fell into a tense hush, expecting a miracle like they expected a performance. His voice came out louder than he planned. "Listen, you rebels!" The word hung in the air. Rebels, not people, not family, rebels. Moses heard himself and didn't pull it back. "Must we bring water for you out of this rock?" He said we, not God, not the one who gave the command. He raised the staff higher. His hands were steady, but his heart was not. He could feel something in him pushing for control, like if he struck hard enough, he could silence them forever. For a flicker of time, Moses knew this wasn't the way. But anger has a strange gravity. It pulls decisions down fast. He stepped closer to the stone. The staff hovered over it. The crowd leaned in. Aaron's face went tight, like he wanted to stop him, but didn't know how. Moses drew a breath, and the staff began to fall. The staff hit the rock with a sound that felt too loud for the open desert. A sharp crack, then silence again. Moses didn't stop. His jaw was locked. His arms moved like he was finishing an argument with the stone itself. He struck it a second time. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Just the crowd's held breath. Just Aaron's rigid stillness. Just Moses' own pulse pounding in his ears, shouting louder than the people ever did. Then the rock answered, not with words, with water. A thin line at first, like a secret slipping out. Then more, fast, spilling, running, spreading across the dust. It glittered in the sun like the desert had suddenly forgotten it was cruel. The camp surged. People rushed forward with jars, bowls, hands. Children dropped to their knees to drink. Mothers cried, not from fear now, but from relief. Men who had shouted turned quiet, as if the miracle had stolen their anger and replaced it with hunger for life. Moses watched it happen and felt a strange emptiness. The water came, but it didn't feel like victory, because he could still hear the command in his head, speak, not strike, not rage, not you rebels, and not we. Aaron grabbed Moses' sleeve, gentle but urgent. Look, he whispered, nodding toward the flowing water. They're safe. Safe, yes, but Moses didn't feel safe. He felt exposed, like everyone had just watched him win the wrong way. The crowd didn't notice. They never did. They only saw the water and the staff and the leader who made it happen. They cheered and drank and praised God with mouths still wet. But Moses couldn't shake the weight of what he had done. He stepped back from the rock, away from the crush of people. The staff hung at his side now, quiet again, innocent again. Aaron followed, voice low. Moses, we should pray. Moses nodded, but he didn't move. His eyes stayed on the water spreading through the sand. He thought about all the years of leading, all the moments where God's patience had covered their mistakes. And then a colder thought slid in. What if this time God doesn't cover mine? The air around the rock felt different now, not just holy, tense, as if the miracle was not a reward, but a warning. Moses felt it before he heard it, like the desert itself holding still. Then the presence returned, heavier than before, and Moses knew the next words would not be about water. They would be about him. The water kept running, and the people kept drinking, but Moses couldn't join their relief. He felt like a man standing in shade while everyone else stood in sun, separate, watched, alone. Aaron guided him away from the crush toward quiet. Their sandals scraped over stone. Behind them, laughter rose for the first time in days. Moses didn't laugh. He stared at his staff, the same wood that had been lifted in faith so many times, the same wood that now felt like a witness. Aaron spoke softly, like he was afraid loud words could break something. "You gave them water. God still provided." Moses shook his head once. He said, "Speak." The sentence came out thin, not angry now, bare. Aaron didn't argue. He couldn't. His eyes flicked toward the rock, toward the crowd, then back to Moses, like he was measuring how big the damage was and finding no edge to it. The air turned still, not the stillness of a quiet camp, the stillness before a verdict. Moses felt it in his bones first. The presence, not far, not hidden, close enough that the hairs on his arms lifted under his cloak. Aaron lowered his head. Moses wanted to do the same, but his pride fought for a second. Pride didn't look like boasting. It looked like refusing to admit fear. Then the voice came, steady, not loud. It didn't need volume. "Because you did not trust me enough to honor me as holy before the people." Moses' throat tightened. He didn't move. He couldn't. The words kept coming, calm like a door closing. "You will not bring this assembly into the land I give them." For a moment, Moses didn't understand. He heard every word, but his mind tried to reject the shape of it. Not bring them in? He had carried them through heat, through hunger, through nights when the camp felt like it would tear itself apart. He had stood between God and the people like a shield again and again. He had given up quiet, comfort, even family ease, and now, one moment, one swing of the staff, one sentence spoken wrong. Aaron let out a breath that sounded like grief, trying not to become a cry. Moses felt his knees weaken, but he stayed standing. Not because he was strong. Because falling felt like admitting the world had changed, but it had. The promised land had always been ahead like a light in the distance, a finish line, a reason. Now it was still ahead, just not for him. He wanted to speak, to ask for mercy, to explain the pressure, the thirst, the noise, the years. But the presence did not ask for explanations. It had asked for trust, and Moses had answered with anger. The crowd behind them cheered again, lifting full jars. They didn't know their leader had just been sentenced. Moses turned his face toward the desert horizon. His hands trembled once around the staff. Then he swallowed it down. Because the worst part wasn't the punishment. The worst part was that he knew God was right, and he still had to lead. That night, the camp felt louder than usual, even with full jars. People talked like they had won something. They told the story in big gestures, how the rock broke open, how the water never stopped, how Moses made it happen. Moses sat outside his tent and listened to their joy like it was happening in another world. The air was cool now. A thin wind moved through the ropes and fabric, making the tent sigh. Somewhere a child laughed. Somewhere a man sang a short, grateful song. Moses didn't stop them. He didn't correct them. He didn't stand up and say, "It wasn't me. I failed today." He just held his staff across his knees, turning it slowly, feeling the old grooves in the wood. Aaron came and sat beside him. No announcement, just a quiet presence, like a friend who knows words will only make it worse. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Aaron whispered, "They needed water." Moses nodded once. "Yes." Aaron waited. "And you were tired." Moses let out a dry laugh that had no humor. "Tired doesn't excuse it." He stared into the dark, where the desert swallowed everything beyond the last torch. "I've been angry before," he said, "but today I wanted them to feel small." Aaron's shoulders sank. He didn't deny it. That hurt more than any argument. Moses kept going because once the truth starts moving, it doesn't stop easily. When I said we, I heard it, even as I said it, like my mouth ran ahead of my fear. He tightened his grip on the staff. I've carried this long, and somewhere along the way I started thinking the weight made me necessary. Aaron's voice was rough. "You are necessary." Moses looked at him. Not like that. A silence opened between them, wide and clean. Then Aaron asked the question Moses feared most. What will you do tomorrow? Moses blinked. Tomorrow meant standing in front of the people again. Tomorrow meant guiding them, judging their disputes, keeping order. Tomorrow meant pretending he was still walking toward a land he would never step into. Moses' jaw worked once like he was chewing something bitter. I will lead, he said. Aaron's eyes searched his face. How? Moses looked down at the staff. He remembered the voice. Honor me as holy before the people. Not performance, not power, honor. Moses exhaled slowly. I will speak less, he said, and listen more, not to them, to him. Aaron nodded, but his eyes were wet, because they both knew this wasn't the end of the story. A leader could accept a sentence and still be tested again. And the next test would not come with a rock and water. It would come with death, not a sudden death, a slow goodbye, a mountain waiting somewhere ahead. Moses felt it like a shadow moving closer. He didn't tell Aaron, not yet, but he sat there in the cool desert night listening to the camp celebrate and realized he was already starting to grieve a land he would only ever see from far away. Morning came with a strange kind of order. The people had water. The crisis was over. And when a crisis ends, something else always rushes in to take its place. Questions, plans, old grudges waking up. Moses walked through the camp like a man carrying two loads, the needs of the people and the words that still echoed in his chest. He watched families pack, men tighten ropes, women tie bundles. The tents came down in practiced motions. Dust rose in soft clouds. Life moved forward because it had to, and Moses had to move with it. At the edge of the camp, scouts returned with news. The route ahead was blocked by Edom, the nation of their relatives, descendants of Esau. The shortest road cut through Edom's land like a knife through cloth. Moses didn't want knives anymore. He called for the elders. We will ask, he said, not demand. The messengers were chosen carefully, respectful men, calm voices. They carried no weapons in their hands, only words. Moses stood with Aaron as they rehearsed the message, keeping it simple, clean. We are your brothers. Let us pass through your land. We will stay on the road. We will pay for water. We will not touch your fields. It sounded fair. It sounded peaceful. It sounded like the kind of request Moses wished he had made to the rock. The messengers left, walking into heat and distance. The camp waited. Waiting is where fear grows. People stared toward the horizon. Some whispered that Edom would help. Others whispered that Edom hated them. Some said, if they refuse, we take the road anyway. Others said, if they refuse, we fight. Moses heard all of it and felt the same old pull inside. Control them. Shut it down. End the noise. But he didn't. He watched the dust line where the messengers had gone, and he practiced silence. Hours passed. Then the messengers returned. Their faces said everything before their mouths did. Moses stepped forward. What did they say? One of them swallowed. They said no. Moses didn't move. No, but we offered to pay. The messenger shook his head. They said, if we come, they will meet us with the sword. A murmur rolled through the people like wind through dry grass. Anger rose fast because thirst had been replaced by humiliation. Are we trapped? Someone shouted. Are we weak now? Another yelled. Is that why everyone spits on us? Moses felt his jaw tighten. Not again. Not another crowd turning into a wave. Aaron's hand touched Moses' arm, a small reminder. Don't. Moses lifted his palm just once, and his voice came out low. We will not force our way through. The people stared at him as if he had spoken madness. Moses continued, steady, even though every part of him wanted to prove strength. We will go around. Around meant longer, harder, more desert. Around meant complaints would come back. But Moses chose it anyway. because he had learned something at the rock. A shortcut can cost you everything. As the camp began to turn, as the line of tents and families shifted direction, Moses looked toward the distant hills of Edom, not with hate, with a quiet dread, because going around didn't just add miles, it added time. And Moses could feel time running out. The new route felt like punishment, even though Moses had chosen it. The camp moved like a long, tired creature, families in lines, animals pulling, feet sinking into sand, mouths already drying again, as if the desert heard their hope and laughed. At first, people obeyed. They always did at the start of a detour. Then the whispers came back. Why do we always go the hard way? He's afraid. He's old. Moses walked at the front with Aaron, staff tapping the ground in a steady rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. A sound like a clock. Aaron kept glancing at him as if checking whether Moses' silence was peace or a crack. They reached a place where the path narrowed between rocky slopes. The air smelled sharp, like warm stone. No trees, no shade, just heat pressed down from above and rock pressed in from both sides. A child stumbled. A man cursed under his breath. A woman asked for water, and her voice sounded like paper. Then the first open shout, "This is your fault, Moses!" That name, his name, hit like a stone thrown straight at his chest. Moses kept walking. The shouting multiplied. If you had just gone through Edom, if you were strong, if God is with you, why are we always stuck? Moses stopped, not because he wanted to argue, because he heard something new in their anger, not thirst, not fear, a craving. They craved the old life again, the life they swore they hated. They craved a master they could see instead of a God they had to trust. Moses turned to face them. His cloak shifted in the wind. Dust clung to his beard. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He remembered the rock, the word rebels hanging in the air, the verdict. He forced his voice down, calm. We will keep moving. That should have ended it. It didn't. The crowd pushed closer, faces tight, eyes bright with the kind of anger that wants a target more than it wants a solution. Aaron stepped forward. "Please," he said, hands open, "we are doing what is right." Someone spat into the dust. "Right. We're dying out here." Moses felt the rope inside him strain again. Then an edge of movement in the rocks, a hiss, quick and low, a scream. A man jumped back, clutching his leg, eyes wide with shock. Not pain shown, just terror. Another scream followed from the other side of the line. People stumbled, tripping over bundles. Children pulled close. Moses' head snapped toward the rocks. He saw flashes of motion, small, fast shapes slipping between stones. Not one, many. The panic spread faster than any messenger could run. Snakes! The word tore through the camp like fire. Moses stood frozen for a beat. The complaints died instantly, replaced by raw fear. People who had been shouting at him now reached for him with desperate hands. "Moses, do something!" He felt the familiar pressure slam back onto his shoulders. But this time, the threat wasn't words. It was the wilderness itself, striking from the shadows. Moses lifted his staff, not to attack, but to hold the crowd's attention. His eyes searched for Aaron. Aaron's face had gone pale under the sun, and Moses knew this was not random. This was consequence, a test with teeth, and the camp had nowhere to run. Panic changes a crowd in seconds. The same mouths that had shouted complaints now cried for mercy. People pushed toward Moses like he was a wall between them and death. Arms reached out. Fingers grabbed his cloak. Someone fell, and others stepped around him without looking. Fear made them blind. "Moses! Help us! Pray!" Moses raised both hands, trying to slow them. "Stay back! Keep space!" But fear doesn't listen. He looked for Aaron again. Aaron was already moving, pulling people apart, shouting for calm with a voice that was breaking. More screams cut through the air. Not long, not graphic, just sharp, human terror. The rocks seemed alive with quick movement. The desert, which had always been silent, now hissed. Moses' heart pounded. He wanted to act, to fix it, to command the wilderness like he had commanded people. But he remembered the rock. The last time he tried to fix something his own way, the cost had been written into his future. So he did the one thing he could still trust. He stepped away from the crowd, just far enough to breathe, and dropped to his knees in the dust. Not for show, not for leadership, for survival. God, he said, and his voice sounded small even to him. They are dying. They are afraid. I don't know what to do. Behind him, the cries kept rising. The camp was unraveling. Then the presence came, clear, cutting through noise like light through smoke. Moses lifted his head just enough to listen. The instruction was strange, simple, unexpected. Make a bronze serpent, set it on a pole. Whoever looks at it will live. Moses blinked. A bronze serpent? He wanted to ask why. He wanted to argue that it looked like the very thing they feared. He wanted a plan that made sense. But he didn't ask. He had learned what arguing cost. Moses stood fast, wiping dust from his hands. He found craftsmen, men with tools, men who could shape metal even in the wilderness. He didn't explain everything. He didn't have time. Now, he ordered, quickly. They worked with shaking hands. Fire flared, metal glowed. The air smelled like heated bronze and grit. The camp watched from a distance, torn between fear and hope. Some people laughed bitterly. A statue? That's your answer? Others begged, hurry! Moses held a pole when it was done. The bronze serpent curled around the top, catching the sun, bright enough to be seen above heads. He climbed onto a rise so everyone could see. His voice carried, rough but clear. Look at it! If you are bitten, look! A man near the front hesitated, eyes wide, pride wrestling with desperation. Then he looked, and something changed in the crowd. Not a cheer, not yet. More like a breath being returned, like panic losing its grip, one person at a time. Moses watched it spread. Relief, confusion, gratitude, shame. A strange healing that demanded no fighting, only trust. And Moses felt the irony burn. God had asked them to trust by looking. God had asked Moses to trust by speaking. Trust was always the point. Moses tightened his grip on the pole, because he knew what would come next. When the danger passed, the questions would return, and the people would have to decide what they were really following, God or Moses. By evening, the camp could breathe again. People sat in small circles, holding cups of water like treasure. The snakes were gone, at least from sight. The rocky pass looked quiet now, like nothing had happened. Only the shaken faces proved it was real. The bronze serpent stood where Moses had placed it, high on the pole, catching the last light. Some people stared at it too long, like it might keep saving them without God. Moses noticed. He also noticed how quickly people rewrite fear into pride. A man said, "We survived because we were strong." Another answered, "No, because Moses knew what to do." Moses heard both and felt sick. He walked away from the fires toward a darker edge of camp where the wind moved cooler. Aaron followed, slow steps, eyes heavy. "They're already turning it into a story," Aaron said. Moses didn't look at him. "They always do." Aaron's voice tightened. "And stories become idols." That word landed hard. Idols. Things people trust because they can see them. Moses stared out into the desert where the horizon was a black line. "I'm afraid," he admitted. It came out like a confession, not a speech. Not of snakes, not of Edom, not even of their anger. Aaron waited. Moses swallowed. "I'm afraid they will love miracles more than obedience." Aaron exhaled, slow. "And they will blame you when miracles stop." Moses nodded once. He could already feel it. The cycle, crisis, rescue, forgetting, complaining, repeat. The wind tugged at Moses' cloak. He felt older than his years. He thought about the land ahead, still close enough to dream about, still far enough to demand patience. Then he thought about the sentence again. You will not bring this assembly into the land. That wasn't just punishment. It was a limit, a line drawn by God. And Moses hated lines. He had spent his whole life crossing them, between palace and desert, between slave and leader, between holy and human. Now the line was inside him. Aaron spoke, careful. What will you do about the bronze serpent? Moses turned back toward the camp, where the pole stood like a shadow against firelight. He didn't want to become the man who destroyed hope, but he also didn't want the people to worship a tool. He walked toward it. Aaron stayed close. As they approached, a few people noticed and stood. They stepped back, respectful, confused. Someone whispered, "Is he going to move it?" Moses stopped beside the pole. The bronze caught the glow of flames. It looked almost alive. He placed his hand on the wood, and then he did something the crowd didn't expect. He didn't lift it higher. He didn't bless it. He lowered his head and prayed, quietly, where only Aaron could hear. God, keep them from turning your mercy into a replacement for you. When he lifted his head, his eyes found Aaron's. Aaron understood. Not tonight. But soon Moses would have to teach them a harder lesson than look and live. He would have to teach them how to lose something they loved. Because sometimes the only way to save faith is to remove the thing people cling to. Moses stepped back from the pole. The camp watched, and the questions started forming in their eyes. The next days were quieter on the surface. The camp moved again, bending around danger, bending around Edom, bending around whatever could break them next. The line of people stretched across the sand like a long sentence that never ended. But Moses could feel something shifting underneath. Not rebellion, weariness, the kind that doesn't shout, the kind that makes people stop caring, stop listening, stop hoping. That kind of weariness is harder to lead. One afternoon, Aaron fell behind. Not far, just enough that Moses noticed the space beside him was empty. Moses turned and saw Aaron walking slower, one hand pressed to his side as if holding something in place. His steps were careful now, like each one had to be negotiated. Moses stopped. Aaron. Aaron lifted his eyes and tried to smile. It didn't reach anywhere real. I'm fine. Moses stepped closer. The desert wind carried a faint smell of sweat and dust. You're not. Aaron's shoulders rose and fell once. It's nothing. But it wasn't nothing. Moses knew that look. He had seen it on elders who didn't want to admit their strength was leaving. Aaron's voice dropped. My chest feels heavy. Moses glanced toward the moving camp. People were busy, not watching, not yet. He guided Aaron toward a boulder where they could sit out of the wind. Aaron lowered himself slowly, breathing through clenched teeth. Moses' stomach tightened. He had always thought of Aaron as the steady one, the brother who spoke when Moses doubted his own voice, the one who stood beside him when the crowd turned ugly. If Aaron weakened, Moses would feel it like losing a leg. Aaron leaned back against the stone, eyes shut. Maybe it's the heat, he murmured. Moses didn't answer. He didn't want to name what he feared. He called for water. A young man brought a skin. Aaron sipped and coughed, then waved it away. Moses watched his brother's hands, older hands, thinner now. The same hands that once lifted holy garments, the same hands that had held incense, the same hands that had reached out to calm a screaming camp. Now they trembled. Moses looked up at the sky, bright and empty. He wanted a clear command again, a simple instruction like speak, like look, but this time the silence held, and silence can feel like abandonment, even when it isn't. Aaron opened his eyes. Moses, he said softly, promise me something. Moses swallowed. What? Aaron's gaze was steady in a way his body wasn't. "When I'm gone, don't let them forget God." Moses' chest tightened. "Don't talk like that." Aaron gave a small, sad breath. "I have to. You know what this is." Moses didn't want to know, because if Aaron was going, then Moses was closer to the end too. And the end wasn't just a finish line. It was a handover, a moment where the people would look for the next leader, a moment where Moses would have to let go of control again. Footsteps approached. A small group of elders had noticed the pause. Moses stood quickly, blocking their view for a second, buying Aaron a breath. The elders asked, "Is everything all right?" Moses forced his voice steady. "We are resting." They nodded, uncertain, and moved on. Moses sat back down beside Aaron and lowered his voice so only his brother could hear. "You're not leaving," Moses said, like saying it could make it true. Aaron's eyes softened. "I'm not afraid," he whispered. "I'm afraid for you." Moses stared at him confused. Aaron swallowed. "Because when I'm gone, you'll feel the weight twice." And Moses realized the desert wasn't done taking things. It had taken their comfort. It had taken Moses' future. Now, it was reaching for his brother. They reached Mount Hor. Like the mountain had been waiting for them, it rose out of the desert with dark, jagged shoulders blocking the sky. The air around it felt different, cooler, heavier, like the world was holding its breath. Moses didn't announce why they stopped there. He didn't have to. Aaron could barely hide it now. His steps were slow. His breathing was shallow. Even the people who never noticed anything noticed. Whispers spread through the camp like smoke. "Is Aaron sick? Is he dying? What will we do without him?" Moses heard the fear in those questions. Not love, not honor. Fear of instability. That fear always looked for a target. Moses stood outside the tent of meeting and waited. He didn't want to go inside. He didn't want another sentence, another loss spoken out loud. But the presence was already there. The instruction came, clear and unkind in its honesty. "Take Aaron and his son Eleazar. Bring them up Mount Hor. Remove Aaron's garments and put them on Eleazar. Aaron will die there." Moses' hands went cold. He stared at Aaron, who stood a few steps away, watching Moses' face like a man reading his own future. Moses wanted to argue. He wanted to beg. He wanted to say, "Not now." Instead, he did what obedience looks like when it hurts. He nodded. Aaron didn't ask questions. That was the hardest part. He only inhaled slowly and said, "All right." Eleazar stepped forward, younger, strong, trying to keep his face steady. He looked like a man being handed a crown made of stone. Moses said quietly, "Come with us." The three of them began to climb. The people watched them go, thousands of eyes following three small figures up a mountain path. The wind carried no explanation back down. The path was steep. Loose gravel slid under sandals. The sun was sharp, but the mountain shadow cut the heat in strange angles. Aaron stopped twice to breathe. Each time, Moses waited without speaking, because any word might break him. Finally, they reached a high place where the view opened wide, desert on every side, the camp below like scattered seeds. Aaron looked down at it and gave a small smile. "They'll be all right," he said, as if convincing himself. Moses' throat tightened. "They will, because God will carry them." Aaron turned his head toward Eleazar. "And you will help." Eleazar nodded quickly, jaw clenched. Then Moses reached for Aaron's priestly garments. The robes were beautiful even under dust, woven with purpose, made for holiness, made to remind everyone that God was near. Moses' fingers trembled as he unfastened them. Aaron didn't resist. He stood still, letting his brother undress him of office, of identity, of everything the people recognized. Moses lifted the garments and placed them on Eleazar. The weight settled on the younger man's shoulders, too heavy, too soon. Eleazar looked at Moses, eyes wide with a question he didn't dare ask. What do I do now? Moses opened his mouth, and Aaron swayed. Moses caught him fast, gripping his arms. Aaron's face was calm, almost relieved. He leaned into Moses like a tired man finally sitting down. "Moses," he whispered, "don't fight this." Moses' eyes burned. He couldn't speak. Aaron's breath slowed. The mountain wind rose cold against their cheeks. Eleazar stood frozen, wearing his father's garments, watching the moment that would change everything below. And Moses held his brother tighter, realizing this loss was different from the others, because he couldn't fix it. He couldn't pray it away. He could only witness it, and then he would have to walk back down the mountain with one less shadow beside him. The walk down Mount Hor felt longer than the climb. Moses led. Eleazar followed, wearing garments that still smelled like his father, cloth and smoke and desert wind. The fabric moved with each step, loud in the silence. Behind them, the place where Aaron had been was empty. No song, no prayer shouted, no miracle to soften it, just absence. Halfway down, Eleazar spoke for the first time. His voice was tight. "What do I say to them?" Moses kept his eyes on the path. Loose stones slid under his sandals. "You tell them the truth." Eleazar swallowed. "They'll panic." "They will grieve," Moses corrected, "and then they will look for someone to blame." Eleazar didn't answer. He already knew. As the camp came into view, a ripple moved through it. People saw 2 figures coming down instead of 3. They stood. They pointed. The murmurs rose fast. Moses felt thousands of eyes lock onto him like hooks. He reached the edge of the camp and stopped. He didn't step into the noise right away. He let the silence speak first. He let the missing third shape do the work. Then he said it. Simple, clear, impossible. "Aaron has died." A sound went through the people that wasn't a shout. It was a wave of grief. Some fell to their knees, some covered their faces, some stood frozen, as if the words didn't fit inside their minds. Moses watched it spread, and his own grief stayed trapped behind his ribs. Leaders don't get to fall apart first. They fall apart last, alone. Eleazar stepped forward, priestly garments catching the light. The people saw him and understood the rest without being told. A transfer, a new order, a new reality. For 30 days the camp mourned. Not every tear was pure. Some cried because they loved Aaron. Some cried because they feared change. Some cried because grief feels safer than obedience. Moses moved through the days like a man walking through smoke. He helped settle disputes. He kept the line moving. He watched Eleazar learn how to stand in front of the people without shrinking. He listened to prayers at night and felt the empty space beside him where Aaron's quiet presence used to be. On the last day of mourning, the camp shifted. Grief turned into restlessness. Restlessness turned into anger, because anger feels like control. It started with a whisper. "Aaron is gone because of this journey." Then a louder voice, "We should never have left." Then the old poison, served in a new cup. "Moses brought us here to die." Moses heard it and closed his eyes for a moment, steadying himself. Not again. But the crowd didn't ask permission to become a crowd. They gathered. They pushed forward, faces hard, voices sharp. "We are sick of this road. No food we want. Why did you bring us out?" Moses looked over them and saw something that chilled him more than their words. They were not grieving Aaron anymore. They were using him, using his death to justify rebellion. Moses' fingers tightened around his staff. His first instinct was heat, quick, dangerous. Then he remembered Aaron on the mountain whispering, "Don't fight this." Moses lowered his staff. He didn't answer with a speech, he answered with movement. He turned away from them and walked toward the tent of meeting. The crowd followed, louder now, offended that he wouldn't argue. Moses stepped inside, and the silence fell like a door shutting. He dropped to his knees. "God," he breathed, I can't lose them and lead them at the same time." Outside, the voices rose. Inside, Moses waited for the presence. But this time, he feared what God might say, because Aaron was gone, and Moses was running out of people to lean on. The presence answered, but not with comfort. Moses didn't hear a long explanation. He heard direction, sharp, practical, like God was cutting through chaos. The people were turning again. Their grief had soured into rebellion. If it spread, it would eat the camp from the inside. Moses rose from his knees and stepped out. The noise hit him like heat. They were gathered close, faces tight, hands waving, voices climbing over each other. It wasn't just thirst this time. It was bitterness with a memory. Eleazar stood near the edge, unsure where to place himself. He wore Aaron's garments, but he didn't have Aaron's weight yet. Moses lifted his staff, not to threaten, but to be seen. "Enough," he said. The word didn't silence them, but it slowed them. Then Moses did something he hadn't done in a long time. He didn't debate. He didn't plead. He didn't try to win them emotionally. He spoke like a judge. "We are moving forward," he said. "You will not turn back." A man shouted, "And who decided that? You?" Moses felt the old trap open. If he answered in anger, it would become about him. If he answered in pride, it would become about him. If he answered with fear, it would become about him. He exhaled and chose a different route. "God decided," Moses said, steady, "and you already agreed to follow." The crowd hissed back with mock laughter. "We agreed, we were hungry, we were scared, we didn't know Aaron would die." Moses' jaw tightened. He could feel his grief rising like a storm behind his ribs. But he kept his voice calm. "Aaron's death is not your weapon." That line cut deeper than shouting. Some people went quiet. Others grew louder, offended by the truth. A woman pushed forward, eyes wet with rage. "Then give us something. Give us a reason." Moses looked at her and saw the real question behind her eyes. Will God still take care of us? Without Aaron? Without the old way? Moses didn't answer with words. He turned and nodded at Eleazar. Eleazar froze for a heartbeat. Then he stepped forward, lifting a small censer, simple, metal, smoke-stained. He didn't carry it like a show. He carried it like a duty. The crowd watched him, confused. Moses spoke again, quieter now, so they had to lean in. "The priesthood continues," he said. "God has not left." Eleazar lit the incense. A thin ribbon of smoke rose, curling into the air like a prayer you could see. The scent cut through sweat and dust, sharp, clean. For a moment, even the loudest voices hesitated. Moses felt the camp pause on a knife's edge, because incense isn't magic. It's a sign, a reminder that holiness still exists even when people die. But signs can be rejected, and Moses saw it in their faces. Some softened, some hardened. One young man laughed, "Smoke won't feed us." A few people echoed it. The mockery spread fast, because mockery is easier than trust. Moses stepped closer, eyes steady. "You want proof every day," he said, "but proof will not change a heart that wants to complain." The words were dangerous. He could feel the crowd choosing what to do with them. Eleazar kept holding the censer. His hand shook slightly, but he didn't drop it. Moses watched the smoke rise and felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just about keeping order anymore. This was about replacing Aaron's steadiness with something else, with courage, with a new kind of leadership. And Moses realized the next test would hit Eleazar too. Not later, soon, because the wilderness doesn't wait for grief to finish. It strikes while the wound is still open, and somewhere beyond the camp, an enemy was already moving. The enemy didn't announce himself with trumpets. He announced himself with absence. One morning, a group went out to gather supplies and didn't come back. At first, people assumed they were delayed. Then a child ran through the camp crying that her father was missing. Moses felt the air change again, like fear had returned wearing a different mask. Scouts rushed in. Canaanite raiders, one said, from Arad. They struck the edge of the camp, took captives, then vanished into the hills. Captives. The word hit harder than hunger ever did. Hunger was slow. Captivity was instant. The camp erupted, not in complaints this time, in fury. "We go now," men shouted. "We take them back." Moses watched the crowd surge toward action and felt the old danger, a people driven by emotion, not obedience. Eleazar stood near Moses, face pale. The priestly garments looked heavy again. Moses didn't speak right away. He forced himself to breathe, to think, to listen, because if he led them into violence without God's direction, it would become another rock moment, another swing of the staff to prove something. But doing nothing would crush the camp spirit. Moses stepped forward. "We will not move on rage," he said, loud enough to reach the front. "We will move on a vow." The men paused, confused. Moses lifted his hand toward the tent of meeting. "If God delivers them into our hand, then we will devote their cities to destruction, not for profit, not for pride." He made the vow carefully. No treasure talk, no glory, only obedience. The people echoed it, voices mixing into one rough promise. They didn't fully understand, but they wanted a direction they could hold. Moses turned toward Eleazar. "Pray." Eleazar swallowed and nodded, stepping forward with the censer again. Smoke rose. The scent drifted across the crowd. This time no one mocked it, because fear had made them serious. Then the decision came, not from Moses' instincts, but from God's allowance. The people moved. The fight itself Moses did not narrate. He didn't have to. He saw it in the way men returned later, dusty, shaken, gripping rescued family members like they were the only real thing left. The captives came back. Children clung to mothers. A father collapsed to his knees and pressed his forehead to the ground, whispering thanks through broken breath. The camp cried, not from thirst, but from release. Moses stood at the edge of it, watching joy spill out. He should have felt triumph. Instead, he felt something else, a warning, because victory can feed pride as easily as it feeds hope. Already he heard it. "We did it. We were strong. We scared them." Moses stepped into the center and raised his staff. The voices quieted. "God delivered," he said, "not your strength." Some nodded. Some looked away. Moses saw the line in their hearts again. Trust versus ego. Eleazar approached, eyes intense. "They listened today." Moses answered quietly, "Because they were afraid." Eleazar frowned. "Is that wrong?" Moses looked at him. "Fear can start obedience," he said, "but it can't finish it." He glanced toward the hills where the raiders had come from. The desert wind carried the faint smell of smoke from distant fires. "Another test is coming," Moses said. Eleazar's face tightened. "How do you know?" Moses didn't explain. He didn't say, "Because I'm living under a sentence." He didn't say, "Because the wilderness never stops." He just gripped his staff and watched the horizon, because the people had tasted victory again, and victory can make a crowd forget the one who gave it. After the rescue, the camp walked with a new confidence, not peace. Confidence. Men spoke louder. Young ones laughed more. Even the tired faces looked up a little, as if victory had poured a thin layer of courage over their fear. Moses watched it like a man watching a fire catch. Beautiful for a moment, dangerous if it spreads. They moved north, skirting hard ground and dry valleys. The days blurred, sand, stones, wind. The nights tasted of smoke and old prayers. Then messengers returned with another wall in front of them, a king named Sihon, ruler of the Amorites. Another border, another choice. The people were ready to push. Moses wasn't. He gathered leaders and sent a message, almost the same as the one to Edom, but with a sharper edge of urgency. "Let us pass through your land. We will stay on the road. We will pay for water." He chose the words carefully because he had learned the way you ask reveals what you trust. The answer came back fast. Not a refusal with polite distance, a refusal with an army. Sihon came out to meet them in the wilderness, blocking the road with men and weapons, daring Israel to break. When the scouts reported it, the camp buzzed like a hive. Fear and excitement mixed until they were hard to separate. "We beat Arad," someone said. "We can beat this too." Moses heard the pride trying to rise again. He stepped forward, voice steady. "We will not move without God." A man scoffed. "God already gave us victory." Moses stared at him. "God is not a trophy you carry. He is the one you obey." Silence spread, thin but real. Eleazar stood beside Moses now more naturally, less like a boy wearing someone else's clothes. He watched Moses closely, learning not just what to do, but warns of what not to do. Moses went to the tent of meeting. He didn't demand. He didn't bargain. He simply waited. Then the direction came, simple as a door opening. "Do not fear him. I have given him into your hand." Moses returned to the people and repeated it. He did not add his own anger. He did not say we. He said what was given. The people moved. This battle was different from Arad. It wasn't a raid on the edge. It was a clash over a road, over a future. Moses watched men advance with tense faces, watched dust rise, watched the line hold. He didn't glorify the violence. He didn't have to. He saw the result in the aftermath. The road opened, the enemy scattered, the camp moving through land that had been closed a day before. Victory again. And with it, a new temptation. They took cities. They took shelter. They took what they never had in the desert, walls, wells, places that felt like beginnings. People walked through the captured towns wide-eyed, touching stone walls like they were touching a dream. Moses stood on the edge of one city and watched the people spread out, laughing, exploring. A leader should feel relief. Moses felt dread, because a settled camp gets comfortable, and comfort makes people forget the voice that guided them. Eleazar came to Moses, breathing hard from the climb up the street. "They're celebrating," he said. Moses nodded. "Yes." Eleazar's eyes narrowed. "Is that bad?" Moses looked at him. "Celebration is not bad," he said. "Forgetting is." He glanced toward the far horizon where another kingdom waited, Og of Bashan, stronger, bigger, louder. Moses didn't say the name yet. He just felt the next shadow taking shape, because victory wasn't ending their tests. It was sharpening them, and Moses knew the people would soon believe the wrong thing, that their strength had finally replaced their need for God. The next king didn't hide behind messages. Og of Bashan felt like a rumor made solid, taller walls, heavier gates, men who looked like they were born holding shields. His land wasn't open desert. It had towns, roads, fields. It looked like the kind of place Israel wanted. And that made it dangerous, because desire makes people reckless. Scouts returned with wide eyes. "Og is coming out," one said. "He's bringing his army." The camp stirred with a new kind of fear, not panic, calculation. The men who had bragged after Sihon now went quiet. Even the children seemed to sense it and stayed close to their parents. Eleazar found Moses near the front line. "They're asking if we can win again." Moses didn't answer right away. He was staring at the horizon, where dust lifted like a curtain being pulled back. He felt the pressure return, the old voice inside him that wanted to prove something. You can't lose now. They're watching. They'll stop trusting you. He hated that voice. He walked to the tent of meeting alone, not as a hero, as a man who knew his own weakness. The answer came without delay. "Do not fear him, for I have delivered him into your hand." Moses exhaled once, slow. He didn't dress the message up. He didn't add threats. He didn't borrow God's words for his own pride. He returned and said only what he was told. The battle was loud and fast, but Moses kept his eyes on what mattered. The line held. The people didn't run. Fear didn't rule them this time. When it ended, Og's power broke like a door finally kicked open. The camp moved into his land with stunned silence. Wells, shade, stone houses, the kind of stability that felt unreal after years of tents. For the first time in a long time, people talked less about Egypt. They talked about tomorrow. They traveled on until the land flattened and the air changed. The Jordan lay ahead, and beyond it, Canaan, the edge of the promise. They camped in the plains of Moab, across from Jericho, and Moses felt the sharpness of it, so close. Close enough to see the hills, close enough for the people to start acting like they had already arrived. That's when the watchers appeared. Not soldiers, not raiders. Strangers standing on distant rises, looking down at Israel's tents like hunters counting prey. Moses noticed them first. He always noticed eyes. He asked a scout, "Who are they?" The scout squinted. "Moabites, maybe. They're not approaching, just watching." That night, fires burned across Israel's camp like a sea of small stars. Across the valley, other fires answered. Moab's camp, larger, organized, tense. Eleazar came to Moses with a low voice. "They're afraid of us." Moses nodded. "They should be." Eleazar hesitated. "If they're afraid, they'll attack." Moses stared toward the Moabite fires. "Not always." Eleazar frowned. "What else would they do?" Moses didn't answer immediately. He remembered Egypt's power, not with swords alone, but with fear, lies, pressure. "They might not fight us," Moses said. "They might try to break us." Eleazar's eyes narrowed. "How?" Moses watched a single Moabite rider move along the far ridge, then vanish into darkness. "By using words," Moses said quietly. "By using worship. By using what's inside us." Eleazar opened his mouth to ask more. A messenger arrived at a run, breathless. "Moses," he said, "Moab's king is sending men, not with weapons, with gifts." Moses felt the night turn colder. Gifts were never just gifts. He tightened his grip on the staff. And in the distance, beyond the fires, someone began a journey toward a prophet for hire, a man who could bless or curse with his mouth. The gifts arrived at sunrise, not food, not water, not supplies for mercy, gold, fine cloth, little signs of respect that were really chains with soft edges. The Moabite men bowed low, smiling like they were friends. Behind them, their animals carried more bundles than any simple greeting needed. Moses stood with Eleazar and the elders, face unreadable. The lead envoy spoke carefully. "Our king honors you. He asks for peace. He asks that you do not trouble Moab." Moses didn't answer with warmth. "We are camped here because God led us," he said. "We are not here to trouble anyone." The envoy's smile didn't fade. "Then you will understand his fear. Your people are many." Moses heard the unspoken line, "You are a storm. We want to control where you land." The envoy leaned in, lowering his voice like offering a secret. "There is a man," he said, "a seer, a prophet. He can speak words that shape outcomes." Eleazar's eyes sharpened. The envoy continued, "Our king has sent for him to bless Moab." Moses didn't blink. "Bless." The envoy spread his hands. "Words are powerful." Moses stared at the gifts. He could already see the pattern. Moab didn't want battle. Moab wanted a curse, a spiritual weapon, a way to weaken Israel without swinging a sword. Moses said, "Tell your king this. We do not fear words." The envoy's smile twitched. "No one fears words until they work." They left, still polite, still smiling. Moses watched them go and felt the camp behind him buzzing. People loved gossip more than bread. "A prophet?" someone whispered. "They're afraid of us." "Good." Moses turned to Eleazar. "Keep the people close," he said. "Watch what they bring into camp. Watch what they invite us to." Eleazar nodded. "Feasts, marriages, friendly meetings." Moses' mouth tightened. "Yes." because temptations don't look like enemies. They look like relief. That afternoon, rumors arrived faster than messengers. Moab's king had sent elders far away to hire a man named Balaam, a hired mouth, a paid blessing, a paid curse. Moses gathered the elders. "We will not chase shadows," he said. "We will keep worship clean. We will keep the camp holy." Some nodded. Some looked bored. Holiness sounds quiet compared to war. That night, Moses walked through the camp and saw small cracks already forming. A young man flirting near the edge with a Moabite girl who had come with the envoys, laughing, sharing food, touching hands like there was no danger. A group of men talking about Moab's markets, Moab's wine, Moab's easy life. Moses felt a chill, because Moab didn't need to curse Israel if Israel cursed itself. He found Eleazar near the tent of meeting. "They're curious," Eleazar said. "They're not scared of Moab." Moses answered, "Curiosity is the first step." Eleazar frowned. "First step to what?" Moses looked toward the dark valley where Moab's fires flickered. "To forgetting," he said, "to blending in, to worshiping what's convenient." Eleazar's jaw tightened. "We can stop it." Moses nodded, but his eyes stayed distant. Because there are battles a leader can win with commands. And there are battles that happen in private tents, in whispers, in hunger for pleasure and comfort. Battles you don't see until it's too late. A runner came in the dark, breathless. "Moses," he said, "Moab is hosting a feast near the border. They're inviting our men. They say it's for peace." Moses closed his eyes for a second. Peace offered like bait. He opened them again, voice low. "Tell the elders," he said. "No one goes." The runner hesitated. Some already did. Moses felt the ground shift under him. Not an earthquake. Something worse. A slow collapse of loyalty. He turned to Eleazar. "Come," he said. Eleazar's face hardened. "Where?" Moses stared toward the border. "To pull them back," he said. And in his chest, a dark certainty formed. Balaam's words might never touch Israel, but Moab's invitations already had. The feast was lit like a celebration. Torches lined the border path. Music drifted through the night, drums, flutes, laughter that sounded harmless if you didn't know what it was buying. Moses and Eleazar arrived with a small group of elders, staying in the shadows at first. From a distance it looked like peace. Tables, food, smiling faces, hands lifted in greeting. But Moses saw the trap in the details. The Moabite hosts weren't just serving bread. They were serving comfort. They weren't just offering friendship. They were offering belonging. Israelite men sat among them, relaxed, drinking, laughing too loud. Some wore garlands like guests at a wedding. Some had forgotten they were strangers. Moses stepped forward, staff in hand. His voice cut through the music. "Come back." Heads turned. Some men flinched like children caught stealing. Others rolled their eyes. One young man stood, swaying slightly, cheeks warm with drink. "Moses," he said, as if speaking to an annoying uncle, "we're not at war. We're making peace." Moses stared at him. "Peace that costs your loyalty is not peace." The Moabite host smiled politely. "Leader of Israel," he said, bowing, "we honor you. Sit, eat. Let there be friendship." Eleazar's hand tightened on the censer he carried. His eyes were sharp, but he stayed silent. Moses didn't sit. "These men leave," he said. The host's smile stayed. "Why? Are you afraid of food?" Moses' jaw tightened. He could feel anger trying to climb up again. Anger that wanted to smash tables, shout names, prove strength. He swallowed it. "This is not about food," Moses said, voice low. "This is about worship." The host lifted his hands innocently. "Worship? We are grateful people. We honor our gods. You honor yours. Is that not tolerance?" Tolerance, a sweet word that hides a knife. Moses took one more step forward and saw it clearly now. Beyond the tables, near a smaller fire, a carved figure stood, simple, decorated with flowers. People were bowing near it, laughing, kissing their hands to it like it was a game, an idol, not hidden, invited. Moses' stomach turned. He looked at the Israelite men again, and his fear sharpened into something worse than anger, disappointment, because they weren't being dragged. They were choosing. "Moses," one man muttered, "don't make a scene." That sentence broke something. Not Moses' temper, his patience. He raised the staff, not to strike anyone, but to point like a verdict. "You are making the scene," he said. "You are bringing Egypt back into your heart." Eleazar stepped forward, voice firm. "Come now," he ordered, priestly garments catching torchlight. "Back to the camp." Some men obeyed instantly, shame pulling them up from their seats. Others hesitated, eyes darting to the Moabite women, to the food, to the music. Then the Moabite host leaned close and whispered so only Moses could hear, smooth as oil, "You can't control desire, old man." Moses' eyes locked onto his. "Watch me." He turned to the elders. "Take names," he said. "Bring them back." The elders moved, pulling men away, dragging some by the arm when pride refused to walk. The music faltered. The hosts stopped smiling. Moses led the line back toward the camp. Behind them, laughter restarted, mocking now. Eleazar walked beside Moses, tense. "Will this stop it?" Moses stared ahead. "No," he said. Eleazar's voice sharpened. "Then what will?" Moses didn't answer, because he already felt it, like thunder behind hills. Sin doesn't end with one feast. It spreads. It infects tents. It reaches families. And when it does, God's response is never casual. As they neared the camp, a cry rose from inside. Sudden, scared, too loud for an ordinary night. Moses quickened his steps. Eleazar did too, because something had already started, something that would not wait for morning. By morning, the camp didn't feel like a camp. It felt split. Some people stayed near their tents, ashamed, whispering. Others acted like nothing happened, walking with a new boldness, like rules were optional now. And then the sickness came, not with drama, with dread. A man stumbled and sat down too hard. A woman's voice rose in panic. People started pointing, backing away from each other, eyes wide. The air filled with questions nobody wanted to say out loud. Is God angry? Moses moved fast, staff in hand, but he could feel how late he was. This wasn't a single mistake. It was rot, spreading quietly. He found Eleazar near the tent of meeting, already praying, incense smoke thin and trembling in the wind. "Many are falling ill," Eleazar said, voice tight. Moses' jaw clenched. "Call the leaders." They gathered, faces pale. Moses spoke low but hard. "Stop the gatherings. Separate those who joined Moab's worship. Bring the elders. We will judge this." The word judge made people flinch. They wanted mercy without change. Then the moment came that made Moses' blood run cold. Right in the middle of the camp, while fear was rising, while people were crying, one Israelite man walked in openly with a Midianite woman at his side, like he was proud, like he was daring heaven to blink first. Moses stared, unable to believe it. This wasn't secret sin anymore. This was a challenge, a statement. Your God won't stop me. The crowd froze. Some gasped. Some laughed nervously. Others looked away, not wanting to be involved. Moses stepped forward, staff lifting without thinking. But he stopped, because this wasn't a rock he could strike. This was a heart refusing to bow. Eleazar's eyes followed the man. So did the eyes of a young priest, Phinehas, Eleazar's son. Middle Eastern man, approximately 25, tan/olive skin, short black hair, clean-shaven or light stubble, intense eyes. Phinehas didn't shout. He didn't ask permission. He moved. He grabbed a spear from a guard near the edge, quick, decisive, and followed the pair into the man's tent. The camp held its breath. No cheering, no gore, just silence so loud it felt like pressure in the ears. A moment passed, then another, and then the wind shifted, as if something heavy had lifted. The cries in the camp softened. The panic stopped climbing. People looked at each other like waking from a fever. Phinehas stepped out of the tent alone, face set, hand steady on the spear shaft. No triumph, only grim clarity, like he had done something terrible but necessary. Moses stared at him, chest tight. He hated that it had come to this, but he also felt the truth. Someone had finally treated holiness like it mattered. Eleazar walked to his son slowly, eyes wet. He didn't hug him. He just nodded once, father to son, priest to priest. Then Moses turned back to the crowd. "Look," he said, voice shaking with controlled grief, "this is what your choices cost. Not just you, everyone." The people didn't shout back this time. They listened, because for the first time in a long time, they were afraid of the right thing. Moses lifted his eyes toward the distant hills across the Jordan, so close and still so fragile. He whispered, almost to himself, "God, keep them when I'm gone." And the question that hung over the whole camp was bigger than sickness, bigger than Moab. Can they stay faithful without Moses?